Hey students, welcome to the first guidance video for week 3 in Ethics, Nature and Human Flourishing. So this week we are continuing our discussion of meta-ethics. So we're looking again at whether there are such things as moral values or moral features, whether there is such a thing as moral reality. So last week we looked at two quite famous and influential arguments against the idea that moral values are part of the fabric of the world or the furniture of the universe, right, to use those phrases from J.L. Mackie's text. So both Mackie and Ayer are both they're moral skeptics. Right? Mackie is skeptical about the existence of moral reality. Ayer is skeptical about moral language and the content of moral language. To put it more bluntly, Mackie argues that there is no moral reality, right? In his terms, that objective moral values don't exist, aren't real. And Ayer thinks that moral language has no meaning. Right? When we make statements such as, stealing is wrong, we're not really making any kind of moral claim at all. That moral language it's not even false on Ayer's account. It's kind of not true or false. It actually just means nothing and describes nothing. Now, Mackie's argument is going to be particularly relevant for us this week. His argument, as we know, his conclusion is that there are no objective moral values. And the implication of that is that all moral statements are false, he thinks. So we're reading Alice Crary and John McDowell this week, and they're both pushing back on this argument, explicitly engaging with Mackie. Crary mentions Ayer's kind of argument as well in her piece when she refers to logical positivism, and to expressivist and what she calls boo-hurrah theories. You can look that up online if you like. If you Google sort of meta-ethics and boo-hurrah, it's a kind of funny way of describing Ayer's own account. We can talk about about why it describes Ayer's position this week. But neither Crary nor McDowell are moral skeptics. Right? They're both moral realists of a sort. Right? So when people talk about realism in philosophy, they often don't mean the same thing as people do outside of philosophy. So by realism, we don't mean something like being realistic, in the sense of not being overly optimistic or fanciful in your views, right? So it's not that sense of the word realism. When we talk about realism in philosophy, we mean a commitment to a certain view about reality. So, for example, you can be realist about mathematical objects. Right? If you think numbers are real, you're a mathematical realist, right? Or a realist about numbers. In the context of meta-ethics, moral realism means you are realist about moral features and moral reality. Right? Basically, you think that moral reality exists, is real. Right? That's the sense in which Crary and McDowell are realists. So for both Crary and McDowell, moral values are part of the fabric of reality. Right? They are part of the furniture of the world, in Mackie's phrase. But we'll see that they have to do a lot of work, very interesting philosophical work, I think, to try to establish this. Right? And in particular, they both think that we need to rethink how we understand reality, and specifically objectivity. Right? So they think that there are such things as objective moral values. They think that moral features are part of reality. But they think that we have to rethink how we understand reality and objectivity if we're going to see how that's the case. Both take Mackie really seriously, right? And I think they both think that he gets certain things kind of right, roughly right. Neither Crary nor McDowell think it's acceptable to posit a special world or reality, like Plato did, a moral reality that somehow transcends, the physical world or something like that. Right? So they're not going to take a kind of supernaturalist position and say that moral reality is real. It just exists in its own, on its own plane of reality. They're not making an argument like that. Right? So I think they think that that Mackie's right to reject this. And both will also concede that moral features, moral values, etc., are different from the features described by natural science, let's say. So they are part of the furniture of the world. They are objectively real, but perhaps not in the way that that rocks and tables and atoms are. So they think they are objectively real, but we need a particular way of understanding, the sense in which they are real. And they're not going to say that they are real in the way that tables are. So we saw that Mackie doesn't deny that statements like "he's a coward" can pick out real features of the world. Right? Mackie thinks cowardice is real, right? And courage is real, and so on. Right? A statement like "he is a coward" is not necessarily false, as long as we understand it purely descriptively, right, rather than evaluatively. Right? So a statement like "he's a coward" means something like, he tends to buckle in the face of danger, something like that. And Mackie thinks that's fine. Some people are more likely than others to buckle in the face of danger, right? Some people are cowards, right? That's all fine. There's nothing wrong with statements like that. But as we know, I mean, if you call someone a coward, they're likely to be upset by that, right? Because it's an insult. Because that statement is also usually taken to have an evaluative component. It's not a purely neutral description to say you're a coward. It's not usually understood in a purely descriptive way, in the way that saying, he has brown hair, right, is kind of purely descriptive and doesn't seem to imply any particular evaluation. It's not insulting to describe the color of someone's hair, usually. But it is insulting to call them a coward, usually. And that's because we think cowardice is bad. We think that it's it's bad to be a coward. And this is what Mackie thinks is suspect, right? So it may be true that someone tends to buckle in the face of danger, but what isn't true is that there's anything wrong with that, objectively. You might say it's just a fact about a person, like the color of their hair. The descriptive part is okay, Mackie says, but the evaluative part is false. Right? The evaluative component of statements like this is false because it implies the existence of something, i.e., objective moral values, that don't really exist. Right? So that's the sense in which Mackie has an error theory, as we know. So we also saw that Mackie makes two arguments for the claim that objective moral values don't exist. The most persuasive, I think, and influential is his argument from queerness, and that's the one that we can focus on this week. It's the one that interests both Crary and McDowell the most. So the argument from queerness is that there is something kind of strange, kind of queer, about any object that has to have the following two features. One, mind independence, and two, that they merit certain actions or behaviors on our behalf. So mind independence and meriting certain actions or behaviors on our behalf. They're action guiding, you can also say. So mind independence for Mackie is what it means for something to be objective. Right? This is just how he defines objective. The thought is, and it's quite a powerful thought, is that something can't just be in our heads if it's going to be real. If we disappear off the face of the earth, mind-independent things will stick around. They'll still be here. They are there anyway, right, to use a phrase that McDowell will use. They're there without regard for us. Right, so that's the sense of mind independence that Mackie's working with. And for something to merit an action or behavior on our behalf means that we are obliged to respond to it in a certain way, or in certain ways. So for example, if it's wrong to steal, then that should imply that we shouldn't do it. That's the sense in which moral values are supposed to be action guiding, right? or to merit certain actions or behaviors from us. And so Mackey's point is that these two things fit together rather awkwardly, or in fact that they just don't fit together at all. Right? One of these things is about the world outside our minds, after all. Right? That's mind independence. While the other is about us. Right? It's about what we should do. So how can something exist outside of our minds while also having this deep relation to us as human beings? That's the queerness issue that Mackey picks up on. So you could think of an example like someone saying, the ocean is furious. Right? This might just be a poetic way of speaking, of course. Right? Someone might just say, the ocean is furious, and what they really mean is that the sea is wild, the waves are crashing, etc. Right? So it might be a kind of, bit of poetic license. But if you think that the ocean really is furious, right, in the way that a person can be furious, you're making a mistake about the ocean. We might say that you're kind of projecting something onto the ocean that isn't really there. Right? Something from your own mind has been projected onto something that is mind independent. So Mackey thinks we're doing something similar when we invoke objective moral values. Right? We're projecting something that is really in our own minds onto mind-independent reality, acting like it's really there when it's actually not. So neither Crary nor McDowell will deny that this is possible. Right? Sometimes we do mistakenly project onto reality, right? Project our minds onto the world. But they don't think that all of our moral thought and language is like this. They think that there is moral reality, that objective values do exist, and these things are genuinely action guiding too. So they're going to take Mackey head on, and they're going to say that moral values really do exist, and they are genuinely action guiding. Other philosophers in response to Mackey have taken different options, saying hanging on to one and not the other. There's a sense in which McDowell and Crary want to hang on to both. But one way of describing their position would be to say that they think Mackey is wrong, that objectivity just means mind independence. They both think, and surely they're right, that there's an important sense in which moral values are dependent on us, on our minds. They're not fully mind independent in the way that tables and atoms are. They are not there anyway, we might say. But they think that this doesn't mean they are necessarily not objective. So in the next video, I'll talk in more detail about both of their texts.